Dana White just made some big fight announcements. It is no longer a mystery as to who Khamzat will be facing next. Dana White made it easy for us. That's right. Anthony Hernandez versus Reinier de Ridder. They are going to main event UFC Vancouver in October. We have some other fights that were announced recently that I'm going to get to. But this is our number one contenders fight. This saves us from the bland number one contenders fight that is Imavov versus Baraujo. And again, those guys are deserving, all right? But this is so much better. This is the real number one contenders fight. This is the one that has all the hype on it. These are the guys that actually have X factor, and I'm so excited for this. I'm so happy that Hernandez didn't get tossed to the wayside. To be honest, I was hoping Khamzat was going to turn around for October. He said in his post-fight press conference that he was maybe interested in fighting in October. The UFC didn't call his bluff. I guess they want to build the next contender a little bit more, and that may have to do with the fact that Khamzat's just so dominant. You really do have to build a contender for him even more than some of these guys are already built, because some of them are already pretty established. But before I break down this and before I get into some of the other fights that have been announced recently, this October is going to be the best October. Forget October. It's going to be the best month in MMA history. For MMA fans, this is the most stacked month you will ever see, and we are going to look at all of the cards in October. Another fight that was announced, this is going to be on the Vancouver card. Ayman Zahabi versus Marlon Vera. These guys are going to battle it out to determine who the worst ranked bantamweight is. We also have on the same card Kevin Holland versus Mike Malott. And in the same month, on a different card, this is going to be on the Oliveira versus Fiziev card. That, again, there's been some talks of MVP and Carlos Pratas fighting on there. Either way, Pratas is probably going to be on there too. This is another edition. Davidson Figueiredo versus Montel Jackson. Talk about stacked fight nights. All right, there are 3 big fights on UFC Rio. There are 3 big fights on UFC Vancouver. I mean, those 2 fight nights, those are stacked, and we have 2 pay-per-views in October as well. We also have for UFC 320 the return of Patchy Mix versus hyped-up prospect Jakub Wiklacz, or is it Wiklacz? Blachowicz. I know it's spelled similarly to Blachowicz. Wiklacz. Is it Wiklacz? Is it Jakub Wiklacz? Is that how I pronounce it? There's got to be some Polish people in here that can correct me. I'm going to say Jakub Wiklacz because the CZ, that's the same thing as Blachowicz, right? Either way, this guy, Jakub Wiklacz, he's getting a lot of hype. And if you look at some comment sections, there are actually people, if you go to some of his fights on YouTube, there are some people saying things like Patchy Mix is fucked. And I've got a lot to say about that. But let's look at how great October is going to be for MMA fans. And then let's dive into some early predictions for all of these fights. This is our October. I think that this is the best month in MMA history because of just how amazing every single card is. Now, I'm somebody that complains pretty often about the lacking quality that we have on pay-per-view cards, the pretty shallow fight nights. But, I mean, I have to give the UFC a ton of credit. This is the best month I've ever seen. It starts off with UFC 320. Magomed Ankalaev, Big Mog, who I will be training with very soon, versus Alex Pereira. Merab versus Corey. Yuri Roundtree. Abu Smagomedov, Joe Pyfer. Ateba Gautier versus Ozzy Diaz. All right? This is an amazing card. We also have the Rio card that just had Figueiredo versus Montel Jackson added to that. And also, we have to assume that Carlos Pratas is going to be fighting on that. There's no way the UFC is going to fumble that. And we have Vicente Luque versus Santiago Ponzinibbio. Man, I don't remember the last time we had a Rio or Brazil fight night that was this stacked. This is more stacked than some of the pay-per-views we've had in Brazil recently. I mean, I remember that Pantoja versus Urseg pay-per-view. This is going to be better than that. And this is a fight night. Oliveira, his comeback. Rafael Fiziev. Can Fiziev actually knock someone out? Now he has the opportunity to, because Oliveira got knocked out just a few weeks ago. All right. And then, of course, this is the Rogers Arena Vancouver card where Reinier de Ridder and Anthony Hernandez are going to be fighting. And we have a lot of other good fights on there. And then to wrap it all up, at the end of October, we have Aspinall versus Gane. And this is not a complete card, but so far we have Rakic versus Azamat, the Density Max or Mirzakhanov. We have Alexander Volkov versus Jelton Almeida. We have Tom Aspinall versus Cyril Gane. One more big fight, and this can be a stacked card as well. Right now, it's not looking so great, but you know what? I'm not going to do too much complaining, but let's be honest, I'm a little bit worried about this. But again, 2 pay-per-views in 1 month. The return of Tom Aspinall. Let's be honest, you can't get that hype for Tom Aspinall fights, and I love Tom Aspinall. He's one of my favorite fighters, but it's just because he's so dominant and his fights are so quick that they can be a little bit anticlimactic. It's like the opposite of Khamzat with how we're worrying about Khamzat fights in the future, right? But also just in general, it's like, it's not the total opposite of Khamzat. Khamzat will either get you out of there in the first round and have it not be competitive, or he can do what he did to Dricus and have it not be competitive. The point is, you sort of already expect him to dominate now. That's kind of how it is for Aspinall. But there's like no way it gets out of the first round with these bums at heavyweight. There's just no way. And Gane is not a bum. Gane's not a bum, but still. I don't know. It's hard to look forward to what I know is going to be a total domination, like a 2-minute KO. I would look forward to Khamzat out-grappling someone for 25 minutes over that a little bit. To be honest, just because I've seen a bunch of Aspinall KOs. But I love Tom Aspinall. I want to see him get the job done. But I don't know. It's unfortunate that he didn't get to fight John Jones, because the only way to truly make a Tom Aspinall fight, a fight where you know it's going to end early, that entertaining, is to have the guy across the cage from him be a big name. And John Jones, Alex Pereira, Magomed Ankalaev, those are the only big fights for Tom. So either way, this is October. What do you guys think? I think this may be the best month ever. I mean, unbelievable cards back to back to back to back. And then when is UFC? Okay, I think, UFC 322 may be in the beginning of November. So we could have like a 5-6 week stretch where we have the best fight nights, pay-per-views that we've ever had. So I'm really looking forward to this. Thank you to the UFC. They're doing a good job with this. But let's get into some early predictions. Starting off with Reinier de Ridder versus Anthony Hernandez. I think that Anthony Hernandez is going to beat and break Reinier de Ridder. Now, I am going to concede to the fact that if there's anyone aside from Dricus du Plessis that may be able to hold up in a dogfight, in a barn burner, it's someone like Reinier de Ridder. Reinier de Ridder, he's got that dog in him. He's got the nasty knees in the clinch. He has the exact techniques you kind of need to get by against someone like Anthony Hernandez, who's always going to be crashing forward. But Hernandez is just so tough. I've seen him get hit and kicked over and over and over again by some of the most brutal body kicks in the UFC coming from Roman Kopylov, and he didn't even wince. He just smiled at him, right? I think this is going to be another Hernandez domination, and I can't wait to be vindicated on all of the Hernandez talk hype that has been coming from this channel. I am telling you right now, Anthony Hernandez, he may not beat Khamzat, okay? But I think Khamzat's not going to be around for that long, and even if he sticks around, I still think Anthony Hernandez at some point will be a world champion. Out of everyone in that like title picture, de Ridder, Baraujo, Imavov, I think Anthony Hernandez has the X factor, okay? He's got it. Many fighters lack the X factor, okay? Now, I say Reinier de Ridder has more X factor than Imavov versus Baraujo. What is X factor? It's something you can't really quantify. Khabib had it, right? I would even argue Dricus had it. Merab 100% has it. Volk 100% has it. Ilia Topuria has it. All right. Islam Makhachev has it. At one point, Oliveira had it. I think that it's very rare, but it's just, it's one of those things where I just don't see Anthony Hernandez losing a fight right now. I don't see him losing to anyone. I think he's too well-rounded as far as skill goes. I know his striking is not amazing, but it is good enough, and he's tough enough. He's got a granite chin, so, like, you got to put him out early, and if you can't do that, like, his chin and his striking is good enough to get by when he's putting that pace on you, mixing in the grappling. I think he's too much for everyone in this division. Again, it's going to take a Khamzat to beat him, in my opinion. It's going to take someone that can overwhelm him early and submit him, which I do not think Reinier de Ridder will be able to do. His grappling is not on Khamzat's level, and I don't think his control is on Khamzat's level. So ultimately, Reinier de Ridder, great grappler, pretty underrated with his striking. He's got a pretty high fight IQ. He's very tough as well. He's crafty, but I'm sorry, Hernandez, he's got everything. He's got toughness. He's got like a really good ability to impose his will in the striking because he can mix in those takedowns all the time, and he just never, ever gets tired. And I've seen Reinier de Ridder get tired here and there. I know he's got a pretty good gas tank, but nobody's got an Anthony Hernandez gas tank at middleweight. So I am going to be leaning towards Anthony Hernandez. I think he'll get a finish. This is a 5-rounder. But I do think de Ridder has a chance to win this. And I think the way he'll win is by finish. I think you have to finish Hernandez in order to beat him, or you're going to have to do what Khamzat just did to Dricus du Plessis, which is hold him down to where his pace and his technique doesn't really mean anything, because Khamzat's so technically good at being a blanket sometimes that he can just keep you in those positions. But Reinier de Ridder, he's not Khamzat Chimaev. He will not do that. He needs to get a finish, and it's possible, but I've seen Hernandez fight some tough guys that have hit him with pretty hard, gnarly punches, gnarly kicks, and he just, they don't affect him. So Hernandez gets this done by finish, and he will be fighting Khamzat Chimaev next, and that is a fight I will be super hyped for. But if Reinier de Ridder goes out there and knocks out Anthony Hernandez or just beats him, I'll be super hyped as well. Now, of course, we've got to see what happens with Baralho and Imavov again. I've been giving that fight some flack, not because I'm not high on their skill sets, not because I don't think they're deserving. They are deserving. The winner of that should fight for the title next. It doesn't mean that they should be the immediate ones fighting next, but they should not have to fight anyone in the meantime. They should wait for their title shot 100%, and the UFC owes them that. But, I mean, I guess we'll see if they can put on a statement, but I don't know, man. I feel like even if Imavov gets a finish, I just, there's something about Imavov and Baralho, I can't care that much. I'm sorry. Like, I'm high on Imavov. I think he's a very good fighter, but this is the real number one contenders fight, guys. But let's get on to Holland versus Mike Malott. This will be interesting because Mike Malott looked exceptional in his bounce back victory against Charles Radke. He looked really good, but it's Charles Radke. I know he's powerful, but he's not Kevin Holland. He doesn't have a long, rangy man's game. And I think that this is going to be a really tough fight. I'm looking forward to it. But now we're seeing Kevin Holland come off of a loss, so maybe he'll actually have a good performance. But I don't know. I think Mike Malott gets this one done, but it may be trickier than he may think on the feet. Like this, again, Kevin Holland, he's got a frustrating style to deal with because of his reach, because he can just hit out at range. Maybe we see Malott grapple, but you know what? If this guy was able to out-grapple Neil Magny and take him down effortlessly for 2 rounds until he gassed out and got finished, I think he'll be able to get Kevin Holland down if he wants as well. So I'm also considering that or factoring that into my prediction. Figueiredo versus Montel Jackson. Montel Jackson, to be honest, I feel like he kind of deadened his hype, and he already barely had any hype. He was like the dark horse of the bantamweight division. Not many people were talking about him, but he was always kind of in the mix, sort of known for his knockdowns, but he's not a super active fighter, so you don't really see him in the cage that often. But that last outing, the last fight that he had against, who was it, Daniel Marcos? It was a stink fest. It was boring as hell. But now they're giving him old Davidson Figueiredo, who a couple of fights ago looked really good, right? He was on a 3-fight win streak in the bantamweight division not too long ago, but against Corey Sandhagen, he really looked like shit. And I know Corey looked great, and this is a big step down in competition, and I actually do expect Figueiredo to do a lot better. But I don't know. You know what? I actually may pick Figgy, because Figgy at bantamweight actually has a pretty decent chin. And even though he's old, he's still got a little bit of that speed because he's used to fighting in the flyweight division, or at least he fought there for so long. He's obviously going to be pretty fast at bantamweight. I might just go with Figueiredo based on the experience because, again, if you're having a extremely boring stinkfest, not imposing of your will type of performance against Marcos, I think I have to pick Figueiredo, okay? Last but not least, it looks like the UFC is done with the Patchy mix experiment, okay? Because this is basically the type of matchup where they're telling him, start over. It's time to start your career over. We gave you a big jump up in competition. We gave you a big name, not really a big name, but someone that was ranked. We gave you a ranked opponent in the UFC, someone that had been around in the UFC for a while, in Mario Batista. You failed miserably, you shit the bed, and we're going to have you just fight like any other type of new UFC fighter. We're going to have you fight someone that may have, just joined the UFC. You're going to take someone on that's making their debut. And so he's fighting Jakub Wiklacz. And Jakub Wiklacz, there's going to be a lot of hardcore fans hyping this guy up, I guarantee it. Jakub Wiklacz is the new real hardcore fans fighter to hype up. And listen, don't get me wrong, I know he's from a decent promotion, and I know he's probably been a champion there. But I actually watched some of his fights, or skimmed through some of his fights, watched some of his highlights as well. This guy's not that great. I've seen some comments saying Patchy Mix is fucked on some Jakub Wiklacz fights. This is not Mario Batista, and he's not anywhere close to Mario Batista when it comes to the striking. And why do I say the striking? Because ultimately, that's where this guy is probably going to have to win. Patchy Mix is really good on the ground. I'm not saying that it's impossible that Patchy Mix has been overrated on the ground and maybe Jakub Wiklacz can test him there. Maybe he can test him a little bit, but let's be honest, Patchy Mix, if there's anywhere he's actually very good, it's probably the ground game, the submission game. He's not like a super explosive wrestler or anything like that, but he's a good grappler, and Jakub Wiklacz, for the most part, is a grappler. That's basically what he does. If you look at his record, it's all either decisions or submissions. If you look at his fights, it's a lot of grappling, a lot of wrestling. And unless this guy is the next Mateusz Gamrot, which, again, I've not done so much research on him, and maybe some super hardcore KSW fan that watches every KSW card is going to be correcting me. You didn't know, man, and it's all good, but Jakub Wiklacz actually competed in the same competitions that Mateusz Gamrot competed in. He was in ADCC, this and that. But if that's not the case, Patchy Mix is going to do just fine in this fight. I think he'll probably win this matchup. Because listen, even though Patchy got schooled by Mario Batista, he was in there in moments landing his own shots. Round 3, Patchy Mix was actually kind of landing, and he's super tough. It's possible that he could get chinned because he's just so stiff and he's so open. And, we've seen fighters like Chris Moutinho take an ass whooping against Sean O'Malley, and we were talking about, maybe he does better because he's super tough, and he'll just get chinned immediately. Maybe Patchy Mix, with his lack of head movement, literally just gets knocked out. Maybe we see that. But I don't know. I'm not impressed by Jakub Wiklacz' striking. I feel like his striking is pretty mediocre. It's not standing out at all. And again, for the most part, he's a grappler. So I think Patchy Mix is probably going to have a big grappling advantage, or maybe just enough of a grappling advantage. And I think his striking, although it's not very good, I don't see anything that impresses me from Jakub Wiklacz. And again, let's not get ahead of ourselves. Just because Patchy Mix got outstruck by Mario Batista, it's not like that was... He didn't look like TKZ when TKZ fought Volk, okay? Gotta mention Volk. All right, but you know what I mean? He was in there in moments. He was in there in moments, man. TKZ wasn't in there in moments, son. The point that I'm making is Mario Batista is probably one of the best strikers in the UFC. Okay? Does that mean he's top 10? No, but he's definitely top 5 best strikers at bantamweight. Right? Jan, Umar, who else? Maybe Sandhagen. Mario Batista's got to be in that mix. Sean O'Malley. That's basically like your top 5 best strikers in the bantamweight division. I think Patchy might win this thing. Okay, but again, it should be competitive. I'm not totally writing off Jakub Wiklacz. He's got a well-rounded game. He is no slouch. He is pretty good. But do not fall into the hype. Again, you're going to start hearing about it. The same thing that will be propelling the Jakub Wiklacz hype. There's a difference between being a Jakub Wiklacz fan if you're from Poland, by the way, because if you're from Poland and you watch a little bit of KSW and you're keeping track about who's up next, that's one thing. But if you're hearing a lot of this hype, 90% of it's going to just come from the wannabe hardcore fans. The hype, it's being propelled by the same thing that propelled them to pick Aaron Pico, Patchy Mix. It's being propelled by the same thing that had people saying Patchy Mix is going to be a monster. I think Merab might be a bit of a problem, but I think Jan, I think O'Malley, I think he beats all these guys. Merab is his toughest test, but you know what? I think Patchy Mix, he probably is the best stylistic matchup against Merab. They were saying that. So, yeah, this will be interesting, though. This will be interesting, and there's a lot of pressure on Patchy Mix because even though there's a lot of pressure in your UFC debut, now it's like, dude, you got sort of embarrassed in your UFC debut. It wasn't the best look considering all the hype he had and how he was basically a favorite going into that fight, and he was talking a lot as well. Now you're taking a big drop down in competition against someone that's never competed in the UFC. That is not some, like, you know, big KO artist or anything. He's basically got a simple, for the most part, grappler's game, mediocre striking. If you lose to this guy, like, that's a horrible look. That is a really bad look. So in a way, there's like more pressure on Patchy Mix's shoulders, right? Because it's one thing if you lose to Mario Batista. Okay, you can get back on it, man. You can come back with a win. But if you lose to this guy, I don't know if you can win in the UFC at all. So again, I don't mean that literally, but that's what some people are going to be saying. I mean, you lose to Jakub Wiklacz, there's still some bantamweight. I think Patchy beats some of the Bostrop bros for sure. He probably takes out a couple of fighters at bantamweight 100%, even if he loses this. But you sort of get what I'm saying. So I am excited for this. UFC 320. Wow, man, that Las Vegas card, that Magomed Alex Pereira card is super stacked, really stacked, which is why we kind of need the UFC to come through with one more big fight. That's all we ask. One more big fight for the Abu Dhabi card, the Aspinall card. We need one more. And I think October, we're in Peaches and Creamville, basically. So I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Until next time. The fall is almost here, and if your goal is to put on mass, to gain strength, to get bigger, I recommend hopping on one of my lifting programs, either the Ultimate Lifting Program, or if you're a beginner, the Beginner Lifting Program. If you guys are interested in trying out these programs, check the link in the description and make sure to use code MMA for 30% off.